All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. This is such a high-impact show that I pushed high tempo to the end. We're going to just wrap that up and do a final bell thing, but we want to get right into the Steel City update and the big news out of Pittsburgh. And I'll take a second here to just say that give our condolences to the shooting that happened in Pittsburgh. Don't want to make it a political show, but just give a quick shout out to that. I know it's a rough situation. We hate seeing it. We saw some of the Steelers put out there, wear their shirts in support on Sunday. So sad situation all around. But we're going to go ahead and stick it right with the Steel City update. Leading with that, news out of Pittsburgh is Ben Roethlisberger has broken the index finger, or fractured it, basically the same thing. His left index finger, or left-hand index finger, I shall say. And Matt, you're a quarterback, so how would that impact your play?
In theory, being a right-hander, it really shouldn't have all that much effect. It may hurt if Pittsburgh decides to use more under center snaps, but if they're out of the shotgun, he can kind of he can grab those snaps a little bit easier. I mean, for the most part, Pittsburgh's predominantly out of the shotgun anyhow, so I don't know that it's going to affect the overall offense a whole lot. But you could see the possibility of some fumbled snaps if their game plan is to have Ben under center, because if there's low snaps, if there's things that are going to jam into that finger, it could potentially lead to problems.
And I'll say the one thing that I'm looking at, just going by the actual medical thing, is it's usually 4 to 6 weeks to heal a broken bone. Finger, because it's smaller, might be a quicker turnaround. But what we're having here is the weather's dropping. It's been getting cold out. And for those that haven't played football, the colder it gets, the harder that ball gets. So as he's back in the shotgun snaps, that's where we're going to run the risk of, is it going to hurt the finger more, take longer to heal? Ben's one that has always worn gloves, so that might lessen the impact a bit, but you're still going to have the trouble as it gets colder, something we definitely don't want him to have lingering into the playoffs. So we want to avoid him re-injuring it, and it's a crucial time. I mean, we got the Ravens this week, and everyone kind of has backed up. Ravens have been awful. Just to throw out a stat here, they have had a losing record for like the past 5 years, I think I saw, in the month of October. So something about those late adjustments that Harbaugh does, whatever he's doing there, he's not able to make those adjustments early on in the season, and it's really hurting them. They could have been in the driver's seat in the division with the way the Steelers have started. Steelers are number 1 in the AFC North. And that was going into this week, going into the bye week. They had already claimed that spot, and the Ravens were there to get a game up. They dropped their game. Bengals blew their game. They dropped it. I think it ended up being like a 3-point game. I could be wrong on that. That might have been the previous week. But both teams are right there, and they're kind of just stepping back and saying, go ahead, Steelers. So with this injury, it's coming at a key point in the season, because if they go ahead and knock out the Ravens, it's going to distance them for the division. And that's what we need right now. So, Matt, you have any other thoughts on that quarterback stuff, Ravens game?
I think going in, Baltimore always seems to play a lot better when they're playing Pittsburgh. The rivalry definitely steps up. It adds a little bit to it. I think Pittsburgh is showing that they're able to handle themselves. I'm liking what I'm seeing from their secondary. They're playing a lot better. It's not perfect by any means, but I think that they are showing some improvement. It's not just we'll see what they have versus Baltimore, because Baltimore does have a passing threat. So I want to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, they're going to pull out all the stops. I would agree. This is a time to see what defense is going to show up. We've already talked previously about their mix-in with Lamar Jackson and some of the other packages that they throw, they haven't been consistent. I don't know if that's because of the weapons that they have this season, but it's going to be a test for the Steelers because they're going to throw everything they can at the Steelers. Now,
well, you actually beat me to the punch here with Lamar Jackson. I'm wondering how much he's going to factor into the game plan. He had a touchdown in their last game, and I'm wondering what role are they going to expand that package if Flacco struggles early. What are they going to do to try to generate a little bit of offense?
I think they're going to expand it because the more they lose, they have nothing else to try. Flacco hasn't really been bad. If you look at his stats, maybe he doesn't move the ball as much, but he's typical to, I would say, more of an old school Andy Reid quarterback where you have like the West Coast. You just need to be a possession guy. Hold on to the ball, keep the games close, but they're not winning those close games like they used to. Be it the defense giving up a big play or not being able to punch it in and having to settle for field goals. And in Pittsburgh, we go through the same cycle. So we're familiar with how that plays out. Have an awesome defense, but if you can't punch it into the end zone, what are you going to do? So that's something that I think the Lamar Jackson packages really help their offense. They help get that to the next level because it gives you that other option. When the field's condensed and you have a quarterback that's not mobile, he's not a threat, you can't leave the pocket. If you're having trouble getting a push up front, you're not going to score. You're going to have to settle for field goals. Now you have another quarterback that can get outside, put strain on the defense, kind of spread things out and see what happens. Even if it's more of a red zone package, and this type of stuff started back in college. Remember the Tim Tebow days at Florida, where they really only brought him in that first year in the red zone. And I see Lamar Jackson. I think if they want to find a consistent game plan, that's what they need to do. They need to bring him in more consistently. Have Flacco take care of the ball while Lamar Jackson gets up to the NFL speed, because a lot of people don't realize he's still a rookie. He hasn't played. So I know from a quarterback perspective, Matt, and a coach, how would you balance two quarterbacks like that?
Well, hopefully you don't, is the short answer. I think you go in with a certain game plan of who your clear-cut number one is, which for Baltimore right now, it's Joe Flacco. He is their starting quarterback. Yep. And I think what you don't want to do is you don't want to go too much with Lamar Jackson. You don't want to do too much with Flacco. And you don't want to have it where you divide the locker room, because in a lot of times what happens is you have guys that'll say you'll basically pit the team against each other. You'll be for one or for the other, and you see it happen where it ruins a lot of good teams. I think the way that you handle it is you say clearly right now, in your offensive meetings, you say this is the package that we're going to use, and if it's a short yardage that he goes in, then it's consistent and the team understands that, so that there's no questioning of who should be the guy, because looking at Philadelphia, that could potentially be a situation where you have MVP Nick Foles sitting on the bench and Carson Wentz, who won last week. But I think it's safe to say that the Eagles are kind of struggling given the weapons and the talent that they had last year.
Oh, that's 100% an issue that no one talks about because they won the Super Bowl. I mean, there's no reason the Eagles shouldn't be in command of that division. That division is awful. The Cowboys are a dumpster fire. And if the Eagles can't distance themselves from that, even the Redskins, their defense has been playing consistently. And Alex Smith, that same type of quarterback, going to hold onto the ball, not make a lot of mistakes. The Eagles should easily be in command. I could see the Redskins being that 1B team, but the Giants are awful. They're worse than the Cowboys. There's no reason Philadelphia shouldn't. And if you're looking at that roster, that's the thing that stands out to me. You have two quarterbacks. That is going to divide the locker room no matter how you handle it. They should have traded one of the guys. I know they were worried about Wentz. And to be honest, I don't even know how you would handle that. Do you keep Wentz? I just don't know how you can get rid of a Super Bowl winning quarterback. There's no guarantee that Wentz wins that game. There's no guarantee he wins even any of the playoff games. We don't know how he's going to perform.
I think the thing that you got to look at is that when Wentz got injured, the Philadelphia Eagles staff had to look at Nick Foles and say, okay, what is it that you do well? And kind of change their offense and their scheme around to suit Nick Foles. And so even going into the beginning of the season, it was still tailored for Nick Foles. It was, you can say that your scheme is your scheme, but there's still certain things within it that you're going to do for your quarterback. For example, if you have a really strong arm quarterback that likes to throw deep, you're going to incorporate more of the deep ball versus a quarterback that doesn't have a strong arm. You're not going to win games if you're saying, I expect you to throw 30, 40 yards and they can't throw a duck every time. You got to tailor it to what they can and can't do.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be the GM to step in and make a call. And you don't know what the right one's going to be. You can only predict what's going to happen and then know the answer 3 to 5 years down the line. But fracturing a locker room is something I would try to avoid. Go ahead.
Now I'm biased to this, but I truly believe if you're going to be a successful team, you need to have at minimum an average backup quarterback to be successful. And I know because of my high school experience as a quarterback and my high school coaching experience, quarterback's not a position that you can just take any Joe off the street. You need to have someone that can have control or has an understanding of your offense. And so when you look at teams in recent history, when you look at Pittsburgh's teams, if Ben got hurt, Charlie Batch was a serviceable backup and Byron Leftwich was a serviceable backup. When you look at early New England in their dynasty, Bledsoe was there, Brady was backup. You know, when the star goes down, you have that quality backup. The thing that keeps some of these people in place is having that backup there so that when the starter fails, there's someone that you can fall back to. You know, if instead of, say, Nick Foles in Philadelphia, if they have, insert one of the Cleveland quarterbacks who's been cut or traded or fired or released, put them on the roster, do they do the same things? I think it's safe to say no.
That was going to be the point that I was going to make. You stole it from me. You need to have a backup. The Charlie Batch is the perfect guy. He was already a starter. He flamed out. Now he's settled in for that long-term backup, and he's fine with that. But your other situation was the one exactly I was going to bring up. Tom Brady. Once Drew Bledsoe went down, they had to make that decision to get rid of Bledsoe, and they had to take that next step. The thing for the Eagles, their decision isn't clear-cut because they don't have an aging veteran that they can go ahead and get off. They have a Super Bowl winning guy. That would be like if Bledsoe came back and won the Super Bowl instead of that Tom Brady beating the greatest show on turf. And then what do you do? It's clear whenever the young, hot rookie comes in or younger guy and he wins the Super Bowl, go with him. But here, everyone in Philly thinks Wentz is that young guy, and it's reversed. It's like that situation, except Bledsoe wins that Super Bowl. What do you do? Now we're watching it live with the Eagles, and Foles isn't even as old as Bledsoe was. So it has to be tough.
I think the issue that makes it a little bit more serviceable for the Eagles is the fact that Foles, and I didn't look it up, but I'm sure Foles isn't making anywhere near the money that Wentz is as the quarterback, which makes moving Wentz a lot more difficult because if I'm going to guarantee he has the higher salary. With having the higher salary, it's going to be tougher for him to move from team to team. And not that you would even want to move him at this point, but I think you have two good quarterbacks, and there's nothing saying that you have to rush to get rid of one or the other, because if Wentz has a setback, you want to have Foles there to handle the offense and vice versa.
Well, that's another thing. I'm going to go ahead and shift this into the trade deadline, and we'll get some more Pittsburgh stuff throughout the show here. One of the points, since we're talking about split quarterbacks, I wanted to bring up is the mess down in Tampa Bay. Now, there were rumors, very strong rumors coming out, Sunday. I forget what show I was watching. I mentioned this to Matt before. One of the pregame NFL shows. Fall season's hard. I was in and out of the house. I caught some tidbits, but it was looking like the Bucs were trying to trade Jameis Winston. And one of those suitors was the New York Giants, which would have been an interesting combo if they would have been able to get Saquon Barkley, Jameis Winston, like a mobile quarterback similar to what he had in college. How much that offense would have opened? Could you imagine Jameis Winston, OBJ, and Saquon Barkley? Would have been ridiculous. I think they were trying to move Manning to make that work. And one of the teams that I saw mentioned for Manning was the Jaguars. I don't know if it was a 3-team deal, but as soon as that news broke, it was immediately shut down. No one mentioned it. They just said that Eli Manning refused to waive his no trade clause. And now you're looking at, okay, here's Eli Manning. How ironic that dude was the guy that pushed for a trade on draft day. And it's coming back to bite the Giants. Sure, he won 2 Super Bowls. Those were how long ago? A decade ago?
But he did not win. I'm sorry. He didn't win them. He did. And I'm glad that you brought it, because if he was the one that orchestrated it, then the Giants would be fine right now offensively, and their production wouldn't be hit. I truly believe that the success of the Giants there is boils down to 100% Tom Coughlin. Because when you look at those Giants teams, who stood out during that time? They really didn't have anyone crazy at running back. They didn't have anyone crazy at...
Wait, was that the right Barber?
Tiki Barber was not there, but it was like the Armand Bradshaw and...
Oh, yeah, you're right. They had that triple-headed monster with the running backs.
Yeah, so they didn't have a true running back. They didn't have over the top. They had average wide receivers. Their defense was decent with Strahan up front, but I mean they didn't have. It wasn't like a star-studded team that you would think. It was just they were well disciplined, because Tom Coughlin is known for being a strict disciplinarian, and it shows with the way that. Not in record recently with the Jags, but I think the Jags have separate issues that they're struggling.
And I'll throw this out there too. Maybe this is popular opinion, but if they would have got Phillip Rivers, I think they still would have won those same 2 Super Bowls or something similar.
Absolutely.
Rivers has way better stats than Manning. And he can. I mean, the one thing he's proven that he can win without help.
I mean, the one thing that I'll give Eli Manning credit is that his dad understood the politics of the NFL, and understanding that if he went to a place like San Diego, that his career would have flamed out, and like understanding to get into the right system and into the right organization is the difference between having a 10, 15-year career and being run out after 5 or 6. So, I mean, to that end, I think kudos to the Manning family for figuring out the loophole and just saying, no, San Diego, you're not drafting me number 1, and if you do, I won't play. And ultimately throwing the ultimate, temper tantrum and being able to actually pull it off, instead of them just saying, no, you'll sit out if we don't get the pick.
Yeah, it's tough watching it, because it's been, like I said, almost a decade since they've been in that position. They might have had some playoff runs, but I don't remember them. And now you're looking at it. All you need is Eli to finally take that trade, help the Giants out, go out on a good note, and instead, you're just going to watch him. At this point, they have to bench him. I don't know what to do. They're so bad that you're going to get one of your teammates hurt with the poor passes he's throwing. You don't want to get Saquon Barkley hurt because he's floating a ball in the flat and gets him murdered.
But I think the thing that the Giants people are trying to put out is how bad their offensive line is. If that's true, changing the quarterback isn't going to change it. And who realistically are they going to get? Or they didn't make any trades. They didn't try to do anything to move people around to try to acquire some offensive line help. You'd think they'd be putting out a nationwide APB to try to sign some guys or move some guys out if that were the case.
Yeah, that's true. Let's look at some of the moves that did happen. I had some stuff here. So, Clinton Dix got traded to the Redskins. Ty Montgomery got traded to the Ravens. You remember he was hot for the Packers. They traded him for a 7th rounder. Basically nothing. Golden Tate to
that?
Ty Montgomery.
Who?
Okay. He was with the Packers. You remember the big fantasy football thing was that he could play running back and wide receiver. They just gave him to the Ravens for a 7th rounder, so nothing. Golden Tate to the Eagles, which may work out, but I don't see how adding more weapons to that team. You needed to fill in for Jay Ajayi, not another wide receiver. I mean, you got Alshon Jeffrey back. Like, let's get some running help. The other big one, Demaryius Thomas to the Texans.
I think that's a big one.
And that is a big one because didn't they just
underrated? But
they just lost, was it Will Fuller to an ACL? Or was it one of the other receivers? I know they just lost one of their top receivers. So that is huge to get him across from, now I'm drawing a blank on there. Is it Hopkins?
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep. So get a nice starting receiver on that side. And these are teams that are making moves. Texans are right there. I was actually surprised at their positioning in the AFC. They're 5-3 right now. The closest team to them is the Titans. They're 3-4. So all they have to do is just play consistently, get a couple more wins. They're going to win their division. So that's a big get for them.
Lamar Miller's playing. They're getting a good running game. Lamar Miller's been having some success for them. I think the key for this Texans team is going back to our quarterback talk, keeping Deshaun Watson upright and healthy, because they rattled off wins as soon as they inserted him in last year, and he ended up getting hurt scrambling around. So as long as he stays healthy, I think the Texans go as he goes. The defense is strong enough to hold for a decent run.
That's true. The last move I have definitely shores up the defense for the Rams, as if they needed it. They trade a 3rd round and a 5th round pick for Dante Fowler Jr. from the Jaguars. And
he isn't injured yet?
Huh? He isn't injured
yet? He was injured at Florida. He was injured with for Jacksonville every year. He's like Deuce Staley. He's just constantly on the IR. That's where you can find him.
But now they're bringing in extra help. They don't even need it. So you're looking at teams that just shows you when you have a young team that hits their peak before these contract years come up, you can make moves like this because you have the extra space. So looking at their division, they're already undefeated, and the closest team to them is Seahawks at 4-3. It's not really that close. And they're going to be a runaway favorite, I think, in the whole NFC. You can throw me the Saints at 6-1, but they struggle with the Browns. And just their early games, you can show me, okay, that's a nice, that was early that they were struggling. But until you do it consistently, I don't know what to make of their division. They had lost the game with the Bucs to open the year, struggle with the Browns. Now, speaking of the Browns, they fired their coach and our old buddy Todd Haley. Right? The weirdest timeline. It's like, October, trade deadline's coming up. Are we going to try to make any moves? Yeah, let's fire our coach. Like, you can't beat the Steelers, so let's just fire him. Fire him in the offseason. It doesn't make any sense. So now you fire Todd Haley. You should have just made him the interim head coach. And I know a lot of Pittsburgh people hated Todd Haley, but they had some pretty solid offenses.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is? For as much as people bitched about it, some of the key things from Haley's offense are still present in Pittsburgh's right now, which is why they're winning games and they beat Cleveland.
Well, I would even take it a step further. You can't win or you can't learn a full NFL offense like that in a few months. We talked about it at the college level when Shea Patterson came to Michigan and Harbaugh runs that similar pro system. He's been getting better every week. Baker Mayfield is coming from a spread. He has to learn the same exact transition that Shea Patterson's making. And we talked about it. A lot of other coaches have said that it usually takes about 8 weeks to even understand the system. Baker Mayfield, they're just getting in their 8th week. So to just fire that offensive coordinator, you can't tell me that's not going to set them back. And
I don't know that it will, though. And here's why. Because one of the things that the interim coach is going to do is he's going to keep it simple. With whatever schemes, did they name who their interim coach was going to be?
To be honest, I didn't even care enough to continue reading that article.
Because I don't think that they named them yet, but they have Greg Williams as their defensive coordinator right now. I don't foresee them making changes there. And I don't know who else is on their current staff that they would promote internally. I mean, obviously someone has to take it for the short term, but whoever takes over that role, they're going to keep it simple. You're going to take if Baker Mayfield, he's been your starting quarterback and he's been moving the ball and winning you games. You tailor it to him. You keep it simple for him. You put in just enough to get through the week, and you let him just play. And that's kind of how you survive. I don't know if they have the ponies to make a run for the playoffs for a wild card spot, but I think if they do, they're definitely not going to beat out the top teams for the AFC. That's just not happening. But can they become somewhat respectable? I think they can clean up the season and finish on a somewhat decent note.
Well, to be honest, as long as if they finish second in the AFC North, that's probably going to be your second wild card right now. The AFC East kind of imploded. Patriots were able to take control of that. And the AFC West with the Chargers, they're sitting at 5-2. That would probably be your other wild card. AFC South has all losing records. The biggest other team, other than the Bengals in your division, would be the Dolphins, and they're only 500 right now. So if they were to make that step, and I'll throw a conspiracy out here, they announced the first fire, Hugh Jackson, and 30 minutes later is when they announced Todd Haley was fired. So I wonder if they had brought him in, because he was the pick to be the interim by most media. Whenever they first announced the fire, a lot of people were saying, okay, we're waiting for Todd Haley to get promoted. I wonder if, A, they tried to promote him, he said nah, and they fired him, or they told him that he was fired, he wasn't getting promoted, and he kind of just stepped away. And at this point, we don't know, because it might have been that situation where they're like, look, we're going to keep you on, but we want you to make changes to your offense. And he said, no, look, I've been successful. I know what it takes to win. It just seems weird that you would announce one, wait a half hour, and then announce the other one. It just seemed like the timeline was they had definitely 100% had a meeting with him. Because otherwise you just do both meetings back to back, then call your presser. You don't announce one. They had to think that they were going to be able to keep him, is my thought. It just doesn't make sense. But it is the Browns, though. So who knows? They're not the most organized or the most professional, because, I mean, we saw how other press conferences in Ohio went, the Ohio State one. Like, maybe they just don't know how to give press conferences. You just schedule it, and then without knowing any of the facts, you're like, yeah, schedule. Did you get that conference on the book?
Like, wait a minute, you didn't say Todd Haley was fired. Get back up there.
That's what it reminds me of. The Gene Smith, he's like up there just like not answering any questions. Like, what? I didn't hear that question. It's like, what are you doing? Come on. It's like they have one person and their job is to schedule the press conference. And they're like, yeah, I scheduled that. You guys aren't ready? Oh, I thought you wanted it today at noon. I'll put another one on in a half hour. That's fine. They'll be here. We'll order them pizza. Seems to be what the Ohio press conferences end up being. So, I mean, we're all over the board today. Trade deadline. It's been crazy. I did want to give a shout out. Mitch Trubisky. I know the NFC, what is it, North? I was rough on Mitch Trubisky. I thought he was a bust. I thought that was one of the worst trades that they could have made. And they redeemed themselves by getting Khalil Mack, making John Gruden look like a fool. And now the Bears are sitting there in a heated division. Everyone's within a game or so of themselves. There was a weird tie between the Vikings and the Packers. kind of muddying things up. But the Lions are right there as well. Stafford seems to be playing well. And like I said, it might take about 8 weeks to learn that new offense. Matt Patricia, maybe they're starting to click a little bit. And they just have to go ahead and make some type of thing. I know they lost their last game. The Lions did. The Bears are on the one game winning streak. That's their game up. If Mitch Trubisky somehow pulls out a division win, I really don't see any other team other than the Rams being able to stop them. They could be in the NFC Championship game. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll give props. I'll go back. I know I called him out, and I just wanted to say that I could be wrong. Not a big deal, but I'll gladly give a shout out whenever it's due. So,
but I will say, and as we were talking about it, and I remember us like saying how crazy it was because they had so many issues. But the one thing that Chicago really did right was maybe they listened to the show, because they surrounded them with talent. They got playmakers, they got Cohen, they surrounded him with some other talent and some people that could make plays for him, so that he didn't have to go out there by himself and win the games himself. He could just be, the game manager. And I think it helped having Nagy come over after doing the work that he did with Andy Reid.
Yeah, and you could be onto something, because that first Super Bowl that they lost to the Colts, they had Rex Grossman. They didn't really surround him with talent. They relied on Devin Hester and special teams to get that extra bump. But now I think they've learned from that. They were so close before. I don't know if it's the same ownership. But you can kind of follow that same guideline. Get a Bears defense going, and then the offense, and whenever it's clicking, they're letting him sling it. A lot of quarterbacks are a little protected. I think of Blake Bortles at Jacksonville. You could protect a guy, but he's never going to take that next step until you 100% let him go. So, I just wanted to give a shout out on them. Anything else you have on the NFL, Matt? Might as well transition now.
No, not a whole lot else. I thought it was interesting last night, catching a little bit of the Monday night game, seeing the Bills go out into some of the single wing stuff, or the Wildcat, trying to get a change of pace early in the game. I think the NFL is attempting to try to diversify a little bit within the NFL. I thought that was a nice thing to see, and they were able to move the ball a little bit early on.
And that's one of the things too. That's why I really am worried about the Ravens' approach with this Lamar Jackson thing, because they could be leading a transition where you give them you just go ahead and give him a taste, like the Tim Tebow thing. Give him a taste for a year, where he's running a little bit of offense, getting the game speed down. They're giving a few looks, and then eventually they're just going to turn the keys over to him and say, look, we don't need the Wildcat, because now we have a running quarterback, where every other team that's had one of those has seemingly thrown them into the fire. And to be honest, even like Tim Tebow, when he was in with the Broncos, they kind of just threw him out there, and they protected him so much that it's almost similar to Blake Bortles, where they didn't let him try to win the games, and they tried to limit his throws, and he just isn't accurate into the short game. So it didn't work out. The only other one that I could think of, a dual threat quarterback, would be Cam Newton. I know Tebow won one playoff game. Cam Newton actually went to the Super Bowl, and they kind of let him do his own thing. They modeled the offense around him, making him feel comfortable. And I think that's what the Ravens are going to do. And come on, we all know, Pittsburgh fans, we don't want to see the Ravens have any success like that. We've already seen enough with that Ray Lewis decade. So I'm fine if it doesn't work out, but I'm just a little worried. And I was before the season, and they can go ahead and have awful Octobers, but in the next year or so, if they'd make that transition, I'm going to be not a good look, especially whenever Ben's on the way out, and that transition is going to be a downturn for the Steelers. So anything else before we transition?
Nope.
Had a little break from our football talk here before we get into college football, just to bring up the World Series. And I know Rick's not on. He's probably plotting his angered-filled rant against me. But I had the let me just see if I can pull it up here. Oh, what a coincidence. The salaries for the playoff contenders, Matt, Boston Red Sox payroll, $228 million. Wouldn't you believe it?
It's a lot of stretch.
Yeah, they won the World Series. Color me shocked, Matt. The next closest team was only 205, so they spent basically $23 million extra than the next team. And then underneath them, the third team, the Giants were number 2. The Dodgers, $199 million. Oh, the Dodgers, I think they were in that World Series. So you can't tell me that payroll doesn't have anything to do with it. Sure, you can say, who are we going to sign in the free agency to get the Pirates competitive? The Pirates are 27th. They're not even close to the average. They had I'll say conservatively, let's say they had $70 million in payroll. That's not going to compete with teams that are paying $200 million. It's just not, because you can have more misses at the higher rate. And what I want to see them do is pay the average. Major League Baseball, there's no benefit for them getting a salary cap because they win with these big markets. Look at this top here. I'll read the markets for the top couple. Boston, huge, the whole New England area. San Francisco, huge on the West Coast. Oh, Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, New York, Los Angeles. Then you get into some of the major ones that are kind of smaller. St. Louis, Houston, Seattle. You're just reading like the biggest cities in the United States. That's the teams that are going to pay the big payroll tax. And as a casual baseball fan, you can't tell me that hasn't played a part into the TV ratings drop. It just has to. They're not marketing their guys as much anymore. I would say Pujols was like the last big era where they had multiple dudes that they were marketing. Now you really get Bryce Harper. Trout doesn't really allow himself to get marketed as much. I don't think that's the Major League Baseball's fault. They could have went high with Puig, but because of his on-the-field stuff and the old gentleman club thing, they're like, nah, don't promote that guy. That's not how we play the game. And they missed a mark there because he's been to back-to-back World Series. They really could have been playing up the Puig stuff in the commercials, but they settled in with their old gold standards, Kershaw and whatever other pitchers that are very boring outside of the game. You're just not going to get it. I didn't look at the ratings. Maybe I'll bring it in next week when Rick comes back, if he's back on next week, just to talk about it. But I just wanted to break up the football talk a little bit with the talk on the World Series. Do you have any thoughts on it, Matt?
I mean, it's beating a dead horse, but I'm not saying that you have to turn the lights out and throw money around to be a competitive team. But I think I can remember, God, it was the late 90s, early 2000s when Pittsburgh started this transition, that they were saying we need to develop a farm system. And it's like anyone that's worth a damn, they trade for a handful of minor league prospects, or they trade for well, at some point, if you don't take those prospects, bring them up through your system, and then keep them on the major league roster, then all you've become is what they are, a professional minor league team. One of the things I think for Pittsburgh, it would be nice to have your homegrown talent come up from the curve, work your way up through, and then once they've made it to the club roster and they're showing, some level of competitiveness, lock them into a long-term deal. Well, it's a guy that is playing well for you. Why not don't give him away to the Yankees, to the Red Sox, to the Dodgers? You look at the guys that were contributing, and I told you, what's his face? The St. Louis guy that was with the Pirates and ended up with the Dodgers. He had a good World Series for him. It's just there was no reason to let guys go other than to try to save more money at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I'll never understand, because a lot of fans are like, oh, well, who are they going to sign? McCutchen for one more year? But it's not really him. They had McCutchen for how many years? And they have no one left that's worth bringing in till they trade for a pitcher that's on the decline of their career. We had talked about on the show. Stats have shown that he hasn't been the same pitcher since 2013. So now you're telling me that's your star? You let McCutchen go, but if you're really investing in your farm league, you got to have someone coming up, someone that you can invest in. Another name. Even like Jason Gurley. Why let him go? Why let him go? He hasn't been a lights out reliever, but he was big enough that his name was still floating around with other teams. He's been pretty successful. Why did you need to let him go? You can't tell me you don't have the payroll. If you're way behind the league average, then you have the payroll. You just don't want to make it.
Wasn't it Walker that they let go to the Mets too?
Yeah, and
I mean he was one that they didn't necessarily have to force him out. And he probably would have signed for a hometown discount if he had spent a little bit extra.
Well, that's the one that
he left,
a lot of Yinzers use the hindsight on. Well, look how he kind of fell off, but he was already comfortable in Pittsburgh. He already had the rapport. He had the workout. You don't know if he's going to have that same drop off. So I agree with you.
And I think with that, there's something to be said about having a positive clubhouse and a positive environment to build on. And it seemed like when they had that playoff, it was a one and done deal. But you know what? There's something to be said for we're there. Be competitive. Keep the team the same. Don't allow 3-4 guys off that main roster to just sign other places. And it's not like they were leaving Pittsburgh to sign an Albert Pujols style deal.
Oh.
And even for as much of a Cardinals fan as I am, I wasn't even sad when he signed the deal that he did, because it's like, if you're going to sign a gazillion-dollar contract, that's a lot of money to invest in one player. That if he gets injured, you're missing out on that you could be spending on other players.
And I agree. And another team I'll point out is the Atlanta Braves, just because of the fact that they made the playoffs. They seem to have upside. They're in the bottom of payrolls this year. So we will see, because this is where the Pirates were in 2013. A young team. What happened? They let all those guys basically go for nothing in return, because that's what we're left with now. So are the Braves going to step up and pay for that roster? Because I've been working on just going through and finding like an interactive, basically baseball payroll chart that corresponds, trying to get some numbers. It's been something I'm working on for a while. I've teased it on the show and I just haven't had the time to finish it, but that's definitely going to be coming. And one of the teams were the Atlanta Braves. We're in the 90s. They were with the Yankees paying for that top payroll because they had the TV deal with Ted Turner. He's the owner. They had the TV deal with TBS or whatever. They're getting extra money. Once that stopped, the Braves dropped off. They had won like 10, maybe more than that, division titles in a row because they were outspending everyone in that division. And now I think you had the teams with the droughts, the Cubs and the Red Sox, that saw that the Braves and the Yankees were able to pay for that top roster. They made that move around 2000, right around the turn. If you remember the Moises Alou, what was that guy's name? Berkman. That was a highly paid Cubs team. They just realized that if you throw money on it, you're eventually going to win the World Series, and that's what happened in both cases. Red Sox has won like 3.
Well, and I think the other part to that is, if you're going to be a Moneyball team, you can't screw it up. And there are some cases, there are very few, but when you play the Moneyball and you spend less and you're acquiring talent, that it hits. The more likely thing is to spend the money to try to get that last piece. If you're thinking, I need a bat, and you spend the money for a bat, and if it doesn't pan out, it is what it is. I mean, you're out that money, but at least you're trying to make that work.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about this any longer because we have a lot of college football stuff to get to, but I will give you that point, the Moneyball thing, but I don't think it's ever worked. And I'll leave it with that. I don't think Moneyball has ever worked. You can point to the Marlins. They're not Moneyballing other teams. Hasn't worked for Oakland. They haven't won a title. They have not won a title. So
would you factor the Moneyball with the Kansas City Royals relatively recently?
I'd have to dig into a little bit more, but I thought that they had paid to bring a lot of those guys up, because similar to what the Marlins did. They had a lot in house, and then they brought in the missing pieces. I don't think that's Moneyball per se. They weren't like cutting players trying to keep their roster down. The Marlins got lucky twice because they're hit before the contracts hit. I think the Royals had made some moves to kind of get there, and then they decided that they're not going to sustain it, and that's why they tanked again. But that's a good point. We'll leave it there. I'll make a note of that, and we'll try to get back into that next time, because I know we're going to have some off-season baseball talk we'll be sprinkling in here. So I'll make a note. We'll definitely hit that in the off-season. Let's transition, because we're going long today, to the college football. I have the title on here. The Big Ten is a mess, and I'm just going to hit these quick, and then I'll let you give your insights. First thing, biggest news, DJ Durkin. I think I talked about this. I know we talked about it a few weeks ago, and we let them do their finding. I told everyone they're going to bring him back. I think I said it on the show. There's no reason you stretch out an investigation unless you're planning on bringing him back. Otherwise, they would have fired him. Same thing with Urban Meyer. You would have fired him right away. You were trying to see if you can get out of the contract. Comes out that you couldn't, because DJ Durkin's on record trying to get them to hire team doctors for practices. Guess what? The old AD said no. The kid dies. DJ Durkin's able to point and say, look, you owe me my buyout money because I wanted you to hire a doctor. You told me no. So where does that leave Maryland? You can tell me Maryland's broke because they were broke when they joined the Big Ten, but they can't brag about getting what I don't think they get the full share of the Big Ten money. I think their share was like 37 instead of 50. You can't tell me you can get $37 million from just TV and you can't pay the $6 million buyout or whatever it is. I think their athletic department is just a joke. For them not to get rid of the AD, I know the original report had like their old AD, this guy was interim, and he came in. He already had troubles at Georgia, their current AD. I think Georgia let him go. So what are you doing? Players, they had a player meeting. A bunch of players I heard walked out. I don't know if it's been verified who or how many, but it breaks today. They have the meeting. They're bringing him back, and they're bringing him on the sideline. So that's the big one.
Bringing him back to the press box like Joe Paterno.
Well, as a coach, Matt, how does that affect the team chemistry? Mid-season, they're 5-3 right now.
I'm sure in one way or another that it was being expressed when all of this hit that the coach is the coach until he's no longer the coach. And you kind of go in as Matt Canada was the interim. He filled the void, but it was also not his long term. So all he had to do was just follow whatever the plan was that Durkin had, kind of going in knowing that he was going to be back. And just to say otherwise is craziness.
I feel bad because I know a lot of Pittsburgh people aren't high on Matt Canada because he left for LSU. But, man, DJ Durkin was 10-15 in Maryland. Matt Canada's 5-3. I thought they should have handled it better. And how they could have handled it better is if they don't have the money to fire him, whatever their excuse is, they don't have the thing. Why don't you just say, look, he's coming back, but because of this, we're going to suspend him for the rest of the year as he goes through training with health professionals or whatever. Make something up because you only have 4 weeks left. You have 4 weeks left. He's not going to be around players until he passes certain courses. And you send him to Stanford or some other university where you can say, like, look, we're going to educate him in sports management. He has to get something. You're still going to get paid for the games because we can't fire you or whatever. We don't want to do a breach of contract. But do anything to keep him away from this team this year because this is going to implode.
Oh, but then think about it this way. If they keep him away, then does that open a separate can of worms? Where now, just like we talked quarterback to quarterback, does this change? Players want Matt Canada, not okay with DJ Durkin, and now you're getting, two different sides of players that are trying to advocate for which coach they want.
That's true. But I could see, why doesn't Maryland then push for Matt Canada to get a head coaching job somewhere else? I don't know if that's any better, but right now their recruiting class is 70th. They're right behind, or they're right above Troy, I think. Troy. That's not a good look. That's not going to be saved. The only way it's going to be saved is if you would let DJ Durkin do some recruiting, bring in some other guys, have him do like a dog and pony show where he's going for this extra training.
But why? But you're saying have him with this training. If they're suspending him, then does that affect his ability to recruit? Because also, then what recruiting standpoint what leverage does he have as a recruiter? Hey, I'm suspended because I don't know how to take care of my players. Like, how the hell how do you sit in someone's home and go, oh yeah, right now I'm just kind of hanging out, being suspended? Like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
I know you're disagreeing with me, but the precedent's already been set. They just do the Ohio State suspension, where Urban's allowed to like hang out, text, do whatever. Like, hey, bros, coming in for a meeting. Hey, guys, it's me. I'm still here. I'm just not allowed I'm going to have to go sit outside and watch a game on a TV. So you're technically suspended, but you're there. You know he's there. You know he's there game planning with the other coaches, doing that type of thing. And I think...
If you're going to do the dog and pony show, then just have him back. It doesn't matter.
We'll see what happens, because I don't know how he's going to... I can only imagine the quit that his team is going to have. It's going to be an epic proportion type quitting event that, I mean, the other thing that they could have done, and Maryland can do anything here because the NCAA, I don't even think they care. I don't even know what they're doing. They haven't stepped up and said anything. So Maryland could have even did it one step further and been like, look, we know our roster is going to have a lot of stuff. We're going to sign any transfer waivers after this year if you want to transfer, and then get the NCAA. We're going to push for the NCAA to do this as kind of like our punishment. Since we're bringing him back, we don't want to miss any bowl games or anything. I don't know if they're broke any NCAA rules, but that could have been another way to go if you want the good PR.
But we already know that that's just the standard of the Big Ten.
Oh, I know.
They're doing. I mean, all they're doing is just tarnishing more what's already there.
That whole division is a mess. You have the Penn State thing, then the Ohio State thing this year. You had the Michigan State case. Now this. I have another one. Well, first I'll get into
you have your Purdue case from last year with Wilton Spate and the locker rooms being 1,000 degrees. It's just top to bottom. That's just.
You know what?
It's just Big Ten operates.
That's a good point that I didn't bring up. Remember whenever Harbaugh had said it and everyone asked Urban Meyer to comment on it because he had been in that Purdue locker room, and he's like, oh yeah, I've seen some better rooms, or whatever he said, like that weird vague answer he gave. Came back to haunt you this year, buddy, because you could have had a much more welcoming environment before you guys got your ass handed to you at Purdue. All Harbaugh was asking for was like a more accommodating room, like a nice, friendly, large room instead of having the team split up between 3 little dungeon closets. Like, that would have helped you out. Now you guys can't even win there. You get your ass handed to you. All it would have took now luckily Urban Meyer didn't come out because I was waiting for it. Had it in my little note. I'm like, look to see what Urban Meyer says after this Purdue loss. Because I had thought that he might say something stupid like, hey, yeah, the locker rooms, it wasn't a good look for our guys. I think he might have if it wasn't such a bad loss. And he's having issues, which I have on my thing. He came out today with some medical stuff saying that he's had a cyst, which people have known about and they've wrote about since like 1998 or something. He's had it drained multiple times. It's like in his brain. But it just makes me think, I don't know what to believe anymore with this guy. He obviously lied about the Zach Smith thing. It's in the Ohio State report that he went and asked a grad student or one of the assistants to delete his old text messages. If that's not shady, I don't know what is. You can't tell me he's 100% clean. I know it's the same thing as DJ Durkin when you don't have the dirt and you're paying this guy. And I mean, at least Urban, he's winning games. So they really don't want to get rid of him either. I don't know what you do, but it's hard to feel.
I think this is my whole thing, and I say it in jest with you about how sloppy the Big Ten is right now, but But the bottom line to it is we're so fast to be a trigger happy society. And in, like with the way things are now, it's like we immediately there's allegations or there's something and we think burn everything down, ruin everything. Like it's just there's so much outcry that you want not just punishment, but we want the most severe punishment. And then when it turns back around, like if there were to be some form of scandal at Michigan, would you be the first one to jump up and say, fire the most, one of the more successful coaches that we've had in recent history and blah, blah, blah. Like, would you be the one jumping up to kick him out? If the similar things that were happening at Ohio State were in Michigan, or, name the school and name the scandal. Because if you have a successful coach, you're probably not going to push him out the door.
Well, I got one for you, and I think it was the dumbest decision. And we're going to talk about this more in the college football playoff rankings. I believe that it should be just like the Constitution or whatever the United States law is, innocent until proven guilty. And the big one, the biggest overreaction was my man Mike Leach at Texas Tech. They had the video. The kid said that Leach had a concussion and Leach told him to get in a closet. He took a video, basically, and I'll say it, a cowardly video to get attention because his dad was giving him shit. And I'll say it, Craig James, I think that was the guy's name, the guy who worked for ESPN, that was a helicopter dad. I would go on record and I'd say it if I had an interview with him. I think he was helicopter dadding his son, and that there's no place in that. I mean, you might have been a big time athlete at SMU. You got them put on the death penalty for taking money. So now you're going to you've killed Texas Tech's program. You've killed it. Cliff Kingsbury can't win a big game. I know a lot of people came after Mike Leach, but because this guy was on ESPN, and I think this was a big thing towards the dagger of ESPN with the fake news and the tabloid stuff, because they came out, they ran this video that they got from a kid's dad, got out the lynch mob, got Mike Leach fired. Texas Tech, I mean, there's still a lawsuit where Leach is trying to get millions of dollars that Texas Tech owes him for his buyout. And what happened? Texas Tech has been garbage. And let me just take a look at the latest college football playoff rankings. And I think Mike Leach is in the top 10. So
he's 8.
That's the case right there. You push a guy out, innocent until proven guilty. You have no idea. They didn't even interview anyone. They just kind of pushed him out. And it was all because of that job lynch mob. And to be honest, that's what I wouldn't want to happen at Michigan. And I think that's where you see a lot of people, the big thing with like Michigan, and everyone says like, oh, the snobbery there. And a lot of let's not celebrate on the field. Because I heard Les Miles say this on his podcast. I was listening after the Michigan State game where he like had some choice words about how Michigan doesn't win like that and how they should have integrity. It's a goddamn game. Let the kids have fun. Let them be on the field. Let them scuff up the Spartans logo. Like, don't come out and say your kids didn't do that, Miles, whenever you had a ton of arrest problems at LSU. Like, don't even give me that shit. And that's the one thing that... Go ahead.
That's something that aggravates me. When Les does stuff like that, when Urban Meyer was on his high horse, this is what brought the lynch mob on, was when he was on Fox News with Bill O'Reilly, and he's talking about how, well, if Jameis Winston was my quarterback and that happened, he wouldn't even be on the team. And then his quarterback gets a fucking DUI and just like says, well, he'll sit out of warm-ups or whatever. It was like such a joke that's like, he won't be on he committed an actual crime and was like, nah, we're good. Well, I'm good.
Yeah, like, he had a bunch of ones like that were under the rug. So I agree with you, and that's what rubbed me wrong. And you're exactly right. It's the same as the Urban Meyer thing. Don't give a double standard, because he called out Harbaugh and said Harbaugh never should have called out D'Antonio. Why not? I mean, the NCAA or the Big Ten investigated it. They proved that it was late. They had the flyer. All Harbaugh has to do is send him the flyer. They give the pregame programs every game. He sent the flyer in. They fined Michigan State. But then you have a coach like Les Miles who has an agenda. He's probably mad that Michigan didn't hire him. And then he's going to spew out hate without the facts. Now, how many people, LSU fans, probably listen to that podcast and don't know the entire story, and now think of Harbaugh as like this bad guy. Same with like all the Texas Tech fans and people, not even Texas Tech fans. I would assume a lot of Texas Tech fans would love to have Mike Leach back. But how many fans just watched ESPN, saw that initial report, and it's like, oh man, who would hire Mike Leach? He's an awful guy. When I guarantee he didn't put him in a closet. That's the weirdest thing, to even be like, why would you even think that I would do that? There's 100 other coaches here. Each coaching staff has like 50 guys. So...
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I really not that I want to push those crimes or any crime for that matter under the rug, but I think as a head football coach right now, I see on a day-to-day on a very small school single A, we've had a lot of issues on our team this year, and I think there's stuff that you try to control, but kids are kids, and kids are going to find themselves, especially from 14, 15 to the college age where they're 21, they're gonna make dumb mistakes. They're gonna do dumb kid things. They're in that dumb phase of their life, and when they do those dumb things, they need to have supportive people there to guide them in the right direction and not throw them to the lynch mob. And you take like some of the smaller instances that we had this year, and you put it on a national stage where there's 24-hour media coverage and programs like anything on ESPN that's just going to spin it 24 hours a day and try to just make it more newsworthy and try to get more clicks and things like that for it. It only spirals worse for those kids.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and you're 100% right. The last story I had on here was Rutgers linebacker. Bullock. He's a junior, was charged with a double murder plot. So you have these young guys, for whatever reason, he's in on a murder attempt. Could you hold that against Rutgers? No. You can't.
Yeah, because someone had to have known. Fire the whole coaching staff, fire the president, fire the athletic director, fire the NRA, fire everyone.
And that's what's so disturbing here, is that they're going to bring this up, throw it up against the Big Ten, when that's clearly different. All you're looking at is how do these universities handle it? And I would just like to see more consistency. I think you had brought up Michigan State. Their AD, after the incident with Michigan, he came out, their interim AD, after all of that Nasir stuff with the gymnasts and all kind of stuff. They get this guy in. His statement after that game was, I hear that the Big Ten offices down there favor Michigan and Ohio State. He said that on official record. What kind of crazy crackpot theory could you even have? Like, it just doesn't make sense. If they're really favoring all of these certain teams, why are they two of the most penalized? We talked about Michigan being way, way outside the range of average penalties against them. So you can't tell me the Big Ten. I just think it's poor officiating. But it's just weird that, okay, if you're going to go ahead and try to clean up your university, do it. Don't pretend that the Big Ten has awesome academics and awesome integrity. It doesn't. Look, it's a complete shit show. It is 100% a complete shit show. And I'll say it. Like, at this point, what kind of benefits do you get other than the TV deal from being in that conference? You don't get national respect. Michigan came in at number 5 in the college football playoffs right now. They're undefeated in their conference. If they were in the SEC and they were undefeated in the SEC and lost to Notre Dame, they would be where LSU is right now, 3rd.
Well, look at the top 10 or look at the top 25. You got Alabama that's up there. You got LSU that's up there. You got Georgia that's up there. They threw Kentucky up there. Trying to think, is there another one that's
Florida?
Up there?
Did you say Florida?
Yeah, in Florida. There's 5. Like, how do you?
I think Florida has 2 losses in their head of UCF.
You have 5 teams from one conference. Don't tell me that you're trying to spin it to make sure you're getting the double pull from the SEC.
Oh, I'll say this in your defense. I think they put LSU ahead of Notre Dame so that if LSU beats Alabama, that Alabama only drops to 3. Because I sent you the blind statistics right now.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and read some of these. I know makes for great podcasting when you're just reading numbers. so I try to avoid doing it. But right now, Alabama and Clemson, just doing a comparison because I think Clemson should be number one. And I know ACC doesn't have the strongest record, but just the playoff committee is supposed to take a look at actual numbers. So here's some of the categories that they look at. Wins against Power 5, they both have 6. Wins against Power 5 that have winning records. Clemson has 3. Alabama has 2. Overall opponent record. Alabama's teams, 44 winning percentage. Clemson has played teams with 600 winning percentage. So basically 400 to 600. Clemson's strength of schedule is way better. Then the margin of victory, I think Alabama was sitting at 3 times, and Clemson's right there at 2.9. So everything else is so close, but Alabama hasn't played anybody. They haven't. They played one ranked team, Matt, 25 Texas A&M. Clemson destroyed number whatever, 17, 18, NC State. They destroyed them. They also beat Syracuse, which is ranked around that same range.
But I do think that the one thing in Alabama's favor right now is that they're going to hit that meaty part of their schedule where starting off with it is the LSU game is this week then, right?
Yep.
Is it so they're going to hit that one. There's going to be the potential of running into another one of those teams in the SEC championship game. They're going to be tested several times. The thing that I don't like is that I don't want to see UCF left off the table. I think you look at last year and they claimed the national championship and everyone made a big deal about them claiming a national championship. Give them a seat at the table. Give them the seat. Right now, they're undefeated. They're winning their conference. They have one of the longest win streaks in the country right now. I think at this point they've done enough to deserve a seat at the table. Because this is the one thing with UCF that I fear happening is that they're going to snub them, and then the core group of people that was recruited under Frost, that core group of athletes that maybe could be competitive and shock an Alabama or shock a Georgia or make some noise in this playoffs, they graduate out. And if UCF isn't recruiting on that same rate, 2-3 cycles, 2 or 3 classes down the line, if they're not getting the type of kids that they got last year and this year on the roster, they're going to say, okay, well, fine, we'll let you in. They're going to have one shot, get blown out by 70 with a lesser talented roster, and then go, well, see, you never should have been here in the first place. And I hope that doesn't happen.
I think you're probably right. What's going to happen? There's no way they get in this year because there's too many big name teams that are floating around there. I know Texas got their second loss and they dropped substantially, but if they come back and win the Big 12, they could be sitting there with 2 losses. I think the Pac-12 has the weaker names, Washington State and Utah. I could see them getting in over Washington State, and I've said it before. There could be some chaos. What if Michigan loses to Penn State this week? Beats Ohio State. What would it be? Yeah, beats Ohio State so that Michigan and Ohio State both have 2 losses. And then Michigan loses the Big Ten championship or Ohio State loses to whoever would be in that scenario. Loses to Northwestern, which is like a 4 loss, 5 loss, or they might only have 3 losses right now. But that could happen. And then you're looking at the Big Ten even get in? No. But at that point, did they sneak in like a Penn State that's sitting there with 2 losses and they didn't have the championship over UCF? Or do they try to do something else? You have Oklahoma from the Big 12. You also have all these SEC teams up there. Could you get 3 SEC teams? What if LSU beats Alabama this week? So LSU's there. They go ahead and they lose the SEC championship to Kentucky. I think Kentucky plays Georgia this week. Then you have Alabama with 1 loss, and you have Georgia sitting there with, would it be 2 losses? 2 losses. They have a power schedule. They're sitting there. You could also put in LSU, who has 2 losses. I mean, they're just going to find some other excuse to be like, well, Alabama has to be in. They only have 1 loss. Clemson's in. They're undefeated. And Notre Dame's in. They're undefeated. Like, we just don't have room for you guys. We have to put Alabama and Kentucky in, or Georgia or whoever. So
because the thing that I'd like to see, and I don't think that this hurts the playoff committee right now, is to say, based off the body of work and based off the fact that they are a Division I school that is claiming a national championship and still has yet to lose, put them in your top 4, and then if they happen to lose a game, if they happen to stumble with someone in their conference, there's your ammunition to punt them out and get them out of there. But in the event that they win out, and that's 2 years in a row of going undefeated, regardless of the conference, that's a feat. That's something to be celebrated, and I think that they deserve a seat at the table. Also, with Notre Dame, we've talked about this as if they win out, they got a seat. The recruiting brand, it is what it is. You know they're going to have their seat. I don't foresee Clemson losing.
Well, hold on. I have seen a couple of ESPN guys say that Notre Dame is out, even if they were saying that Notre Dame would get jumped by a 12-1 Michigan. And do you know why that would be, Matt? Because the old ESPN doesn't have that Notre Dame TV contract. They make more money if Michigan jumps them and Clemson's in and Alabama's in and Georgia's in. So they're going to push their agenda here over the next couple weeks.
Let me see Notre Dame win out and make me eat my words that Michigan jumps them. Because if an undefeated Notre Dame team's there, they're in. Lock it in.
I agree. I think college football, and I've said it before, I think they're going to make the biggest brand names. I've seen some people say that Oklahoma's going to be close. Oklahoma's not a draw. They're going to get jumped by Notre Dame and Michigan if it's close. And you could even throw in Ohio State because, what's the difference? If one of these teams lose, I think this weekend is key. And I'll end the show with this. This can be my high tempo, whatever. Michigan plays Penn State. If Michigan wins, they then have Rutgers and Indiana before Ohio State. That pretty much clears up the Big Ten picture. Ohio State has, who did they have? They have Nebraska. Then they have Michigan State and Maryland before playing Michigan. So they have 2 teams with winning records before the Michigan game. So they end their season with 3 straight games against teams with winning records. Does the Big Ten end up with a 2-loss champ? Possibly. Could it be worse than that? 3 losses, 4 losses? Possibly. Because I could see Michigan losing to Penn State, or actually I could see Michigan beating Penn State, Ohio State losing to Michigan State, and then beating Michigan. Where Michigan has 2 losses because of Notre Dame. They get in just because Ohio State already has 2 losses, even though they lost to them. And then you're sitting there with the 2-loss champ, so that it's moot. Notre Dame plays Northwestern. And this is the key game for Notre Dame. If this is Notre Dame's sole loss to a team that Michigan beat, does that offset the loss to Notre Dame? And does that go ahead and give Michigan the bump over Notre Dame because they have the conference championship game still in play? That's what a lot of people are saying. This is pretty much the last trap game for Notre Dame, I believe, on their schedule. Is it at Northwestern or is it at home? That's going to be a key one. And then the big one's Alabama and LSU. If you're a college football fan, you want Alabama to win today or this Saturday. If they win, that guarantees that they're most likely in the SEC championship game, even if they lose to Auburn or they have a drop loss. So there's no way that they can back in. And then that's when you're really going to see the committee. Do they put a team in that possibly loses their championship game? If Alabama would be sitting there undefeated, playing 12 or 11-1 Georgia, whatever it would be in the SEC championship game, if Georgia beats them, do they still sneak Alabama in? That's what we're going to have to see. But we definitely don't want them to lose to LSU. If they lose this game, that's what happened last year. They didn't even play in the game, and they backed their way.
You want to see them lose because the more muddied that this is at come the end of the year, the more of a justification that you have to expand the playoffs. Because if you get another year where you got 2 SEC schools that are in the playoffs, it's a slap in the face to every other conference who has a conference champion who feels like deservingly that they get a seat at the table when you're saying there's 4 seats and you're going to take one conference 2 years in a row. You're basically saying if you're not in this conference, you're not good enough.
Oh, I'll raise you one too. I think that if the SEC gets 2 in and Notre Dame is in, you're leaving out 3 conferences that don't get that $25 million or whatever the split is, there's going to be hell to pay. Because that's the scenario that, so maybe you're right. If Alabama loses this week, sets up that 2 SEC champ team getting in. But you just have to be careful because that kind of happened with Penn State and Ohio State. Penn State dropped that one more game against Pitt, and they were like, even though they won, we're going to hold them out. And I could see them bumping Alabama. And if you want chaos, you want 2 SEC teams to make it with Notre Dame and then everybody else fighting for scraps. I don't think, I'll go out and say it, I would be shocked if the Big Ten had a 1-loss champion. I think Michigan has a strong chance of losing to Ohio State, and I think Ohio State has a strong chance of dropping one of their other games. Just because of their Urban Meyer's health problems we talked about. They have to play at Michigan State. Michigan State seems to be disrespected. They already beat Penn State. I just don't. I would be very shocked if Michigan and Ohio State went into that game 11-1 and together, like to just set that up. I think one of them drops it. Like I said, I think most likely Michigan loses to Ohio State, and Ohio State loses one other one along the way, and Michigan backs into that championship game, and then they're sitting there at 2 losses and they don't get in the playoffs, and you still have the other chaos because the Big Ten says, wait a second, why is the SEC getting 2 teams in when their strength of schedule is so bad? And that's the final question. I guess my last we didn't talk about the ACC football, but Pitt has a big game against Virginia and then one against Virginia Tech. Virginia's in the driver's seat in the Coastal, and I know we're going long, but I just want to say if Pitt wins the next 2 weeks, they're in the driver's seat in their division. And I would love, for chaos reasons, to see Pitt play Clemson again. Because Pitt already played Notre Dame tough. And I would say some questionable play calling and a very tough touchdown by Notre Dame at the end of that game. Pitt was very close to winning that game. So just wanted to bring that up. And I'll admit, Matt, I was wrong about Florida State. And I saw an article. I don't know if you saw it. I think it was on Tomahawk Nation, so you probably did. About a lot of Florida State players quitting during that game. I think Taggart needs to cut bait. I think that's exactly what he's doing, and I think he's catching a lot of hell right now over this. And part of it is the fact that Jimbo talked about the discipline, but more and more reports are coming out now about how he would talk big to the media, but then the kids just did whatever the hell they wanted, which led to a lot of the issues. Like you saw the blowout game was 2 years ago to Lamar Jackson. Yeah. And, where he just pretty much ran wild. And, to lose on Friday night to Boston College, with the talent that Florida State recruits at, you should never lose to Boston College ever. And then to get throttled the way that they did, it was completely unacceptable. And you saw that the kids were quitting because the culture of winning just wasn't there. And for as much as it bothers me watching it, I think you have to give Taggart time. And he's saying the things that he needs to say, but, time will tell as he recruits. The big thing that I liked is that he said you got to recruit winners and you got to try to find the guys that want to win. And I truly believe that. Oh, that's been my saying for my whole life. You know that. Winners win, baby. You got to have that mindset. Got to have it.
Absolutely. And I like that he's saying, we're not just going to go off, because I think and maybe it's a dig on the previous staff, but he's like, you can't just look off the internet and see who the top talent is and recruit, because you need to know who the players are and know who the winners are. And even if you're not getting, the 5 stars, you can still get some of those 4 stars or even to a certain extent, some of the low quality 3 or the high ceiling 3s that are willing to put forth the effort for you and do the things that you need to do to win. So I think as they get adjusted and acclimated to his system, I think you're going to see the turnaround, but it's going to be hell for the rest of this year and probably going into next year if they can't pull some offensive line recruits and get them going in a hurry.
Yeah. And I'll add on that. Look at what Mike Leach is doing. His recruiting classes are just as low as what Maryland's are right now. All 3 stars, if that. And he had said, I listened to an interview with him. I think he was actually on the Les Miles show. That might have been where I got my hatred towards Les Miles this week. But he interviewed Mike Leach, and Mike Leach said, like, he just started to tell people, like, straight up, like, look, hey, you're not a high recruit. If you want to go sit on Alabama's bench, go ahead. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But just so you know, you can come here and you can lead the league in passing. Or you can be a receiver that's getting hundreds of catches a season. So take your pick. And to be honest, I think that's a big upsell to a lot of the kids on the West Coast. Is he going to hit a lot? No. He's never recruited strong because I don't think Mike Leach plays the game sort of like he's very similar to what
he doesn't. And I also think that people negatively recruit against him and say that the air raid doesn't transition well to the NFL, which, you know, with some of the recent trends with McVay and Nagy and Reed, they're showing that it can trade to the NFL or transfer to the NFL, but it's slow going to the NFL that way.
I think the biggest point that he has in his back pocket is Mahomes. That was his system. Texas Tech, they still run his system. Don't even tell me that they don't, because he trained Cliff Kingsbury, and now look where it is. But I'll throw this out there. I think his system is very similar to what John Beli runs for Michigan basketball. And there's a case when you don't recruit the McDonald's All-Americans because you're not offering them whatever the FBI case is investigating, money, cars, whatever. It's tough to get those guys. And can you win? Yeah. Can you win it all? It's yet to be seen. He's got to the national championship game. Is Mike Leach going to be able to get to the playoffs this year? I think basketball, no team has won a national championship since they've started without a McDonald's All-American since they've been keeping track of that stuff. Beeline hasn't had one. So that he gets to the game, he just doesn't have that top talent. Could he win it? I don't see why not. And I think Mike Leach is in that same boat. Can he win? Now it's tougher. Can he win back-to-back games? I think the big year was the Crabtree year, where him and Texas and Oklahoma and Texas Tech were all really close because he recruited that same base of guys, hungry guys that he had that were going to come in and work because they were snubbed by the bigger schools or told, hold on, we might have a scholarship for you. So, I mean, I want the guy to win so bad. And, I mean, we'll wait and see. I think UCF's out. They're putting them at 12 this year. Whatever, but that's it for me. You have anything else, Matt?
One other thing that I really liked this article I read was Larry Fitzgerald apologized for his display of emotion on the field and blames his son. So he scores a touchdown, and he spikes the football in the end zone. And, you know, we were really big on, like, the high-class guys and not showing a lot of emotion. I thought it was funny that he apologized for the fans for like, you know, spiking the ball, which wasn't even bad, but he said part of it was his son didn't want to go to the game. He wanted to go somewhere else instead, and scored that touchdown as kind of like a spike to his son. But I just thought that it was interesting coming from a veteran and Pitt alum, Larry Fitzgerald, that, you know, is one of the more classier players, and he's apologizing for something that I'm sure nobody even batted an eye at, because he scored a touchdown and spiked the ball. It wasn't like he was like planting the flag or climbing the goalpost or anything outrageous. It was just like a normal celebration. It was like, oh, normally I don't do that, and I apologize to my fans. It's like,
I think that's funny, and I think we talked about it earlier in the show. I think it's just the times. Everyone feels the need that they have to apologize when they don't fit, and I hate it. I've always been more of a flashy TO fan. Show me what you got. Show me that celebration and make your name, because they don't care. They don't give two shits about you. Once you're off that roster, all you've got left is your name. How many of those guys are forgotten? Larry Fitzgerald has Hall of Fame numbers. Look at it. How many wide receivers are still getting media jobs? Did we talk about Dan Fouts on this show? This might be my final bell. Every quarterback from like the 80s or 90s, they get first dibs on these media jobs. And Dan Fouts was calling one of the shows and one of the games I watched. She knows which game I watched. And they were talking about how Dan Fouts, we're going to bring him in. We have him on the phone. We're going to have him call in because he's a great quarterback from the 80s. And he has he's great. He knows the game. He's given analysis. Not 5 minutes later, they go ahead and they show a stat. And it must have been week 1 because it was like rookie quarterbacks with the most interceptions in the first whatever game. Dan Fouts. It was like the fact. And I'm like, this is the guy you got calling in, the guy with the most interceptions through the first couple games. It made me laugh so hard. But I mean, why not? Why not be a flashy wide receiver, Larry? Are they going to invite you back on the show? Look at the cast of NFL whatever. It's mainly quarterbacks. Terry Bradshaw, Boomer Esiason. You have Dan Fouts for some reason. If Joe Montana wanted one, I guarantee they'd get him back. They already have Steve Young, Troy Aikman.
They're just wearing shape-up shoes.
Troy Aikman. They'd have anyone. It's unbelievable. How many receivers? Randy Moss on that one ESPN show. Maybe that's it. Oh, I guess Steve Smith. He was going to fight Marvin Harrison or Michael Irvin. So I guess you got those two guys. But not a lot. Almost seems like every game I turn on, there's another quarterback there. Chris Collinsworth. Phil Simms. And I'm pretty sure Phil Simms brought his son, Phil Simms Jr., whatever that guy's name is. He was there doing the one game.
Because he was awful at Texas. Chris Simms.
Yeah. I'm like, why is he here? What is this, a quarterback club? It's basically what it is. So that's it. Matt, you have any last words?
No, I did.
All right,
then you took an extra last word, so we're good.
I know, we went super long, so thanks for listening. Hopefully you liked that action-packed episode. We'll be back next week, so tell your friends. Follow us, S-Bound Sports on Twitter, Southbound Sports on Facebook and Instagram, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.